So starting off with Joachim Quoden. Could you please introduce yourself and a bit about your activities that you're involved in before you could start off with your presentation?
Yes, hello. Nice to be invited. Nice to speak to you. It seems that I would not longer qualify to become a member of the Young Professionals Working Group, unfortunately. Joachim Quoden, at the moment Managing Director of the Extended Producer Responsibility Alliance. This is a club of 26 non-profit producer responsibility organizations, mainly collecting the necessary money to collect, sort, and recycle the packaging that companies put on the market. I'm in this business sector for 27 years now, with different parts, being working for the Ministry of Environment in Germany, working for the German Green Dot Scheme, and then moving in 2001, I think, to the Brussels scene, becoming one of these dangerous lobbyists there, but luckily working a lot with my members on the real issues in the countries. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Joachim, sorry, should I start your presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you will tell me like when I have to change the slides.
Okay. I thought that you asked us first, the three of us, to introduce, but we can now, of course, go immediately into my presentation. Yes, and I will ask you to change the slides, please.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Screen is shared. Okay, you can go immediately to the third slide then.
Okay.
So yeah, one word about my working group, governance and legal issues. So we deal with all the topics that the other 9 working groups do not want to deal with. So a horizontal working group. In the last years we concentrated somehow on the EU waste legislation, because this is usually the most advanced. Studying the new tools, the quite new tools that European Union is using, like extended producer responsibility. We discuss how we can integrate the so-called informal sector, which is in the end present in each of the countries, even in the so-called rich countries. We share how municipal waste management is financed in the various countries, because it's quite interesting to see how different this is from country to country, and legal aspects of different kinds of public-private partnership. And our latest outcome is the so-called A Picture of EPR, a compilation of 26, I think at the moment, articles, views of people who are in touch with EPR. Either they work for EPR or they monitor EPR. So quite interesting, perhaps for all of you, because these are opinions from all over the world, from all the continents, and for most of the waste streams. Next slide. EPR itself, to get an introduction, it's a tool, it's an economical tool to pass individual responsibility to companies who are putting a product onto the market. So the responsibility of a company is not any longer stopping when they sell the product to a customer, perhaps with some 2 years guarantee time, but in the end, in the past, when they sold the product, they were out of the responsibility. Now they are responsible for the end-of-life management and have to take care for the costs for the right treatments. And so the idea is that this is motivating them also to design the products in a better way, because if you are design them so that it's more easy to repair, to recycle, you reduce on the other side your financial costs for the treatment. Can all of you mute your phone? That's easier, I think. Okay. Part of these responsibilities you can transfer to a collective entity, the so-called producer responsibility organizations, and these PROs should fulfill the obligations on behalf of their members, on behalf of obliged in industry. And for this job we are charging some money to the obliged companies. Next slide. This is the classical picture of the idle extended producer responsibility system, where the PROs in the middle of a circle, and the job of the PROs to keep the circle turning. And I think this will be one of the main challenges for my members, but probably very likely for Pascal's members as well, that we keep the circle turning at the moment now as well, when the whole countries are in crisis with low oil prices and so on. So probably we will unfortunately have to inject more money into the circle to keep it turning, to ensure that even in such difficult times as today, we are still able to collect, sort and recycle the products, the packaging that we are putting on the market. Next slide. It is very important to understand that the design of each system in all the countries is usually different country by country, because the idea of EPR is a concept but not a concrete business model for each country. And so it is very important to understand that there are a lot of factors, a lot of legislation which is influencing the design of each national EPR system. Of course, for the European Union, there is EU legislation, then there is the respective national implementation, then of course obliged industry who are founding these PROs, they can take certain decisions as well, how the system should look like. And lastly, and somehow very important as well, our local authorities are involved in the design as well, because in most of the jurisdictions they decide how the concrete collection should look like. Just for packaging, very easy, whether you collect by a bag, by a bin, by a container, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever. So that's also why the system is very often different from district to district. Next slide. Just the example for packaging. Only in Europe, as you can see, you have a totally different implementation country by country. Most of them are using producer responsibility, but of course there are alternative approaches up to now as well, like taxes or a fund and so on. Go on. Next slide. But even if you use producer responsibility, you can see that more or less everything is possible. Full cost, part of the costs, collection and sorting responsibility with local authorities still, collection and sorting has gone to industry with a deposit system, without a deposit system, households packaging different from commercial packaging. So in the end, you can see this is a paradise for consultants. So perhaps you can think about to leave the operational waste management sector and to move to the consultancies, because there's really a lot of opportunity to help industry, to help local authorities to understand the best model for their respective region. Next slide. To mainstream this disaster of different applications a bit. We have now the Waste Framework Directive in the European Union since 2 years. Member states should implement it in national law, I think, in July this year, counting not only for packaging, but of course for WEEE and the other waste streams under EPR as well. And they have now decided to introduce minimum requirements for EPR systems, and all these minimum requirements are based on best practices from the different countries. For example, how the reporting should look like, that you have to treat the producers in the same way, efficient cost, eco-modulation of fees, that you benefit packaging or products that are easy to repair or easy to recycle, and so on. So we all estimate that within the next 5 years the EPR systems in the various countries will evolve a lot, and that the situation of today will change completely, more or less, over the next years. Next slide, probably the final slide, I think. That's it. I think this is my key learning over all the years, that if the value chain, if all the involved stakeholders are not cooperating, every system will fail or will have a lot of troubles. There are many examples in many countries where people decided to fight instead of to cooperate. So I think that one of the main skills that we should have in this sector, in this business, is to be able to look for partners instead of just looking for enemies. I think this is a big lesson I learned. Not only look for your interest, try to look for common interest, and I think that's some of the messages I would like to pass to you. That's it, and thanks a lot.
Shiza?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Joachim, for your interesting insight on the waste packaging extended producer responsibility and a bit updates about how is it going. Next we have Pascal Leroy, who is the Director General at WEEE Forum. Pascal, could you please introduce yourself and a bit about your activities before you start off with your presentation?
So I think Pascal has some problems with the audio connection. So maybe we can go to Thomas.
So we are having
wait. Now
everybody.
Yeah.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pascal Leroy, the Director General of the WEEE Forum. WEEE stands for Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment. I got to the WEEE Forum in the year 2000 when the Commission issued its proposal for a directive. And we speak for 40 producer responsibility organizations. We are, in contrast with Expra, we are not mainly a lobby club, but we do projects in order to inform policy making and in order to be influential vis-à-vis the value chain. Shall I start my presentation?
Yeah. Do you want to me to run the slides and you tell me when I should go to the next one, or you want to share your screen? What is more comfortable?
I tell you how to do it.
Okay. So I start the presentation. Can you see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So next
I go
slide,
through the. Yeah.
Next slide, please. And a short introduction to the WEEE Forum. So we are a not-for-profit association. All our members are also not-for-profit. We are 40 members in 31 countries, not just Europe, but also North America, Africa, and Oceania and Asia. And two-thirds of our members are market leaders. And the Producer Responsibility Organization in the WEEE Forum collected over 2.4 million tons in the year 2018. And as I was saying in my previous introduction, we see ourselves as a competence center to help our members succeed as producer responsibility organizations. Next slide, please. We originally focused on Europe, but gradually we are becoming a worldwide organization with members in Canada and Australia, New Zealand, India, and Nigeria. And there are also producer responsibility organizations in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, South Africa, and Turkey that are expressing interest. And we do this transformation, this metamorphosis, through alliances with United Nations bodies, as well as other worldwide organizations. Next slide, please. And the two themes that we focus on, or the two permanent campaigns, as you wish, is on the one hand a level playing field, and on the other hand the pursuit of quality. So we want to make sure that the operators in the market face a level playing field, but at the same time we want to make sure that we raise the bar, that we do this for the environment, not for the profit of companies, but for the environment. Next slide, please. For example, one of the projects that we ran in the past is a standards project. So we developed quality standards for the treatment of waste electrical equipment. And this private standard, in the meantime, has been transformed into an official standard validated and endorsed by European standardization organizations. What we are trying to do now is to make sure that that the policymakers adopt the standards and make them legally binding. Next slide, please. We also do awareness campaigns. So every year we organize an International E-Waste Day. This year is the 3rd edition in October, and we have had 2 previous editions. If you have, we promote the day as a means to draw attention to the importance of properly treating and properly recycling and collecting and returning e-waste to the proper collection points. And we do this in association with United Nations very often, United Nations University, and also United Nations Environment Program and other partners. Next slide, please. We are mandated by over 31,000 liable producers of electrical appliances, and this is similar to Expra. So instead of packaging, this is for the electronics industry, and we represent the whole spectrum of manufacturing industry. So that's typical for the WEEE legislation in Europe, that we cover everything with a plug and a battery, basically. So from television sets, over mobile phones, over solar panels, lighting equipment, and the large household appliances, and toys even, and large industrial equipment. So it covers everything in the electronics industry. Next slide. And now I will say a few words about WEEE EPR in Europe. Joachim has introduced you already to the main elements around extended producer responsibility. I will just add a few points. Next slide. So the directive gives rise to a number of obligations, and I don't have the time here today to drill down each and every obligation, but one of them is, for example, to register. Another one is to report recycling and recovery targets, so whether or not you have achieved, whether or not you have met the recycling and recovery targets as laid down in the directive. You have an obligation to collect, of course, from officially designated collection points, You have an obligation to finance the costs associated with the treatment and recycling of electronic waste. And you also have an obligation to inform the users, the public at large, recyclers, and so on. And in that context, we created, together with producers, a platform called Information for Recyclers, I4R platform. And it's a platform where you can download forms that show you where you will find components in each product. So, for example, where you can find condensers, where you will find the mercury in the flat panel displays, and so on. Next slide. And also, spider in the web. This is actually typical, or this is similar to what Joachim showed. Instead of the wheel of the circular economy, I show it in this way. So the producer responsibility organizations, we see them as the spider in the web, in the sense that they are the ones contracting with collection points, with the retailers to return or to take back electronic waste. Of course, also with logistics and treatment companies to have the proper and the most cost-effective treatment contracts. The authorities to understand what the obligations are and to see if they reach the recycling and recovery targets. And citizens also, because you want to raise awareness about the importance of returning and collecting electronic waste. So the PROs in the WEEE Forum play a critical role in advancing the whole EPR for e-waste. And they do this on behalf of producers, so of the producers, electronics producing manufacturing industry. Next slide. As you can see, each member state in the European Union has a different number of EPR organizations or producer responsibility organizations. Some countries like France have only a few PROs, but countries like Great Britain have more than 40, if I'm not mistaken, producer responsibility organizations. Italy has up to 15, more or less. So this differs from country to country. Next slide. And I just wanted to say a few words about the difference between now and 17 years ago. So this is really high level in terms of to demonstrate the impact that EPR legislation as originally thought out by Thomas Lindhqvist and his team, how the EPR philosophy, let's say, has affected the market in these 17 years. So first of all, there were no national registers 17 years ago. So we had no idea who was actually collecting e-waste across Europe. You had a few compliance schemes, a few producer responsibility organizations. So Switzerland, for example, 17 years ago had a PRO, Belgium as well, Netherlands and Sweden and Norway. But that was it. The rest of Europe had absolutely no PROs in place. There was incipient legal framework, meaning that some countries had some legislation, but it was only a few countries. There were no clearinghouses. There were no WEEE statistics. So we had no idea what the volume of products were that was put on the market, and we had no idea how much was collected, or what happened to the collected WEEE. And there was little market intelligence. So if you look at the situation now, next slide. You can see that more than 90,000 producers have been registered across Europe. There are more than 190 schemes or producer responsibility organizations. There is WEEE legislation across Europe, not just across EU, but across Europe. Also Iceland, for example, or Norway or Switzerland, they have legislation. There are clearinghouses in 8 states, and the clearinghouse is important to, let's say, clear the market when you have different obligations for different PROs. And then we also have Eurostat figures. Compared to 17 years ago, this is it's a sector where we have compiled a lot of quantitative information, and also key figures from our own key figures. So we know exactly how how many electronics were put onto the market and how much was collected. And we have a lot of market intelligence as well, not just through research institutes like IIEE, the Lund University, but also EU-funded research. For example, the QUIT project was about countering the illegal trade. PROSEM was about quantifying or estimating the volumes of components and materials in products. And this EU-financed research program continues year on year. And so we have gained a lot more intelligence over the years. So this is just to show you an overview of the impact that the EPR has had on the market and on our general understanding. Next slide. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Pascal, for your presentation. Next, we have Thomas for the presentation. Thomas, could you please introduce yourself for the audience and your activities before you could start with your presentation? Thomas, you have to unmute yourself, or maybe Nina, you can do it.
Okay, you can start the presentation. It's good for the introduction also. But, as has been said, I'm from Lund University in the very south of Sweden. And I work at something called the International Institute for Industrial Environmental Economics. Most people don't remember that, but they might remember that there's a lot of I's in our name. IIIEE. Let's see if we get the slides also. Here, we can take the next slide. So, I got interested in this type of questions a long time ago. And many of us, we realized that we needed to reallocate responsibilities to go further. And you do as a researcher, you pick up ideas from different places. I got ideas from Germany, not the least, but also from other countries. And I wrote to the Swedish Expra and proposed something which came to be called extended producer responsibility. You can press on it. When we speak about extended, what it means is that we are going to give more responsibility than before. But it's more than we are used to. Can you take the next? Please press.
Should I go to the next slide?
Oh, no, it's right. Producer, well, we are looking for someone who can take over the tasks which were often at municipality level. And this, for various reasons, came into the focus. I will come back to that soon. Responsibility has several aspects. And important aspects are like the financial. Who is paying? Especially if we want to do more than before, the risk is that we will have to pay more. Maybe we were hoping, and we are hoping, that you will pay more for during a certain time period, and then in the future you will be more efficient. In order to be able to be efficient, also need to have control. And that's where we're coming with physical stability. We need to be able to decide what is happening in order to make it more efficient. Can I have next slide? And very quickly, so we don't forget it, we have several goals, and basically two types of goals. One has to do with the products and how they are designed and what properties they have. And we want to improve that. And the other one is that when the product finally comes to the end of life, we should be effective in collecting it. We should be efficient when we are treating it with good standards, and we should use the qualities of the products and the materials in the best way. Next slide, please. So, how were we thinking? Well, if producers are responsible for more, they will try to find the best solutions, how to deal with it, and an efficient solution, so a solution which has good economical properties, solving the problem with the least amount of resources. Governments will oversee the system, and by implementing good rules and supervising it, you will say that the efficient solutions will become effective also. That is, they will in a good way solve the problem. We say producers pay. Of course, in the final end, consumers are paying, but they are paying on the price of the product. But these producers who live from selling things are also giving the possibility to design solutions which are not only effective, but they are also giving them a good situation. They are efficient. Okay, next slide, please. Now, during the years, I've heard a lot about why do you point to someone like the producer? Producers can't do everything. And I think there's often a misunderstanding. EPR has nothing to do with telling someone that you have done wrong, you are to blame. It's about finding effective and efficient solutions to problems. And the idea around it is that you allocate responsibilities so that problems in the best way. And in many cases, producers are the ones who have the possibility to make fundamental changes, and that leads to the fact that they are giving a lot of responsibility. Next slide, please. Now, as Pascal also said, 17 years or even more back, we were not very good at this. Most of the products in the area of electrical electronic equipment were only collected if we saw a business idea in this. And for very many products, there were none who saw it, or none who saw the possibility of combining a solution of collecting and making good use of it. So we have actually seen a a very big development, and we are so much better at this. But still, we need to improve, not after first collection has happened. In many countries, there's leakage, or the first collection is actually not the official, if we call it like that, systems, but we have unofficial systems which are collecting, and we are losing track of our products. Next slide. Recycling. You must be aware that if you are a recycler and there are no other rules, you will choose the one which is best for you, where you are making a good profit. And when we come to the targets or the rules around it, they are not yet, at least, that stringent. And they are written sometimes in order to be easy to write and maybe also to supervise. And it means that they are lacking some of the details which could be useful, and they are lacking requirements when it comes to what should happen with the material. What is really recycling? When is it good enough? And that leads for some materials into the fact that we are kind of dumping it into other materials and pretending in a way that those are recycled, but we are not really using the quality of the original materials. So, we are not making use of some of the very valuable materials because it's difficult to extract them. We are not making very good use of some of the cheaper materials because it doesn't pay off. Unfortunately, that is the big problem today. Next slide. I remember very well when we started to discuss these things, and we had company after company telling how they are redesigning their products, how they are thinking about the end of life, and as I remember it, a lot happened. Now, a lot happened also for other reasons because of technical development and opportunities and etc. But quite often, you heard about things which were done because of environmental impact. Now looking back, we can say that maybe these incentives were strongest in the beginning, and we have lacked the continuous incentives which will give an improvement over time. We are today hoping modulation will help with that, and I'm sure it will help to some extent, but I fear that this is not enough. We need also to have more stringent requirements on what is happening after the collection in order to create better incentives. Next slide. So, we must find good ways to creating these incentives. We must see to that material are recovered at a very good quality. We need to have a legislation which is leading to this. And even if we are improving rules in Europe, I think we will have to do that again and continue to do it for a period. We have to also see to that the barriers which are making reuse and extended lifetimes are taken away. We have work going on. We are hopefully getting much better at this in the near future, but we still need to think about it. And the last slide. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Thomas, for this beautiful introduction to the extended producer responsibility in general in EPR context. We will be open to Q&A now. We'd like some comments there. There's your questions in the comment section. I personally have 3 questions. So starting off with Joachim. Joachim, could you perhaps comment on how is industry evolving or adapting to the EPR area extending goals and rules?
Can you repeat your question? I only got half.
Okay, so how is industry and the producers are reacting and adapting to the extended or changing rules within the extended producer responsibility mechanism?
I think we are somehow seen as the unloved baby. Industry has understood that we are the best of the alternatives, because the alternatives are taxes, are bans, are restrictions. So I think they start to see, even now after 30 years, more the opportunities in their EPR systems. So in the last 1 or 2 years, I was getting a little bit more optimistic and more, and I could feel more support than in the past. And projects like the CPLEX, the project for flexible packaging to make them more circular with 160 companies from the whole value chain, I think this shows that finally many companies have understood their responsibility and have understood how they can turn it into something positive. I don't know how this will develop in the next 5 years, when surely the EPR contributions of companies will double or triple, so go from 5 billion euros to packaging a year to 10 or 50 billion. Again, the alternative are taxes. So we are the best of the worst industry has. And I'm very sorry I have to leave now, because I have to make call of 2 o'clock 80 times at the moment. So all the best, and hope to hear and to see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Some open-ended questions. Any of the panelists, maybe one by one, you guys can comment on that. So Karim has asked, are PROs usually private companies, or can they be in partnership with governmental institutions? Thomas, perhaps you can answer that.
Well, you can say that anything can happen, but is it a good idea? And I have some strong views on what PROs should be. And I think PROs should be the organizations which are taking care of the interests and rights of the producers. And I think that a good PRO is governed by producers. Now, to say this is maybe easy, and I know that there are examples of PROs which are formed in different ways, and some of them may be working very well. But I think we have to remember that different actors have different interests. When it comes to government, I think that they need to supervise, because these systems are not just running by themselves. And when it comes to recycling activities and so on, we have to remember that the people working, the organizations working in that field have their interest. They have their ways of making money. And that's not always exactly the same interest as other groups have. So I would really like to see producers taking a big responsibilities for how PROs are functioning.
Pascal, would you like to add any comment or further suggestion on this part?
Yes, I'd like to add, actually, I'd like to echo what Joachim said earlier, which is that the producer responsibility organizations play a stabilizing role in the market, because especially the not-for-profit ones, as most PROs are, because they are stabilizing, because no matter what the material prices are, they collect electronic waste, because their primary motive or motivation is not to make money, but to do good for the environment. And so if you're for profit, you will only collect if there is profit to be made. But in our case, we just collect because we have an environmental duty. And that's not the only example of what PROs do, of the importance of not-for-profit PROs. It's also, for example, that they do research into illegal flows, as I showed in my presentation. So we did EU-financed research into what's going on outside the formal waste stream, because as you know, 2/3 of e-waste is not reported and is not properly treated in Europe. So around 60% of the 10 million tons that arises every year in Europe, every year e-waste that arises. And so we did research into to understand what's going on outside the formal systems, the formal reporting systems. There are many examples that I could give to show the importance of the stabilizing role of PROs, and also because they are the spider in the web. They are the ones that are coordinating the different actors in the market to make it all happen, because it's a very complex waste stream.
Okay, we have next question from Jana, and she is asking, is there any study on the most efficient EPR system among EU countries? And perhaps I think it can be explained that what are the criteria and indicators to cross-compare in the studies? Thomas, maybe you can lead on that.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer what is the most effective and efficient systems. I have never been very impressed by most studies, and we are still having problems with statistics in, I would say, all countries, and some countries very, very much, for quite obvious reasons also, but it would take a long time to discuss. So I don't really want to point to any study, but there are studies published all the time.
Okay, perhaps we can connect this to the market intelligence that you mentioned several times. Could you perhaps comment on that and link it to how the cross-comparison studies are being done?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Which studies are done, sorry?
So the question was, like, are there studies being done to show which EU country is the most efficient in extended producer responsibility? But also you mentioned several times that there is lack of market intelligence at the moment. So how we can connect these?
Yeah, well, this is actually a very difficult question, to tell you the truth. I mean, to give you an idea, the WEEE Forum commissioned a study with the United Nations University, it was a lot of money, to understand better what we call the WEEE flows. Because after so many years, we still don't know what exactly is going on. So we know that part of the WEEE flow is people throwing their small appliances in the waste bin. That's around 500,000 tons. But also part of the WEEE stream is illegally exported to Africa and poor places. And then there's more or less 1/3 of the WEEE stream, and we have no idea what's going on. And so we are commissioning a study now into these WEEE flows to better estimate the quantities and also what components are lost to the formal system. And the question, what is the most effective or the most efficient system, is very hard to respond to, because it's exactly what we are asking ourselves as well. There are a couple of factors that you have to take into account. The first one is if there's too much competition between PROs and actors in the market, this often goes at the detriment of the quality of recycling and the quality of collection. That's just a basic fact. So you should never have too much cutthroat competition. Secondly, you need authorities that survey the market and enforce legislation. Very often this is missing as well. So illegal trade is not being checked at the ports in Europe or at the different places where the shipments leave Europe. And so this should improve as well. Then what else? I mean, there are many elements that play a role. For example, in France, there's mandatory handover. So if you collect electronic waste in France, you have an obligation to hand it over to the formal PROs in France, and 2 of them are members in the WEEE Forum. So, and if you don't hand it over to a PRO, you can have a penalty. And so this is called the mandatory handover principle. I personally think this is very effective. Another example is that in France as well, you cannot be paid in cash if you give metal scrap to a recycling plant. So if you collect metal scrap or electronic waste and give it to a recycler, you cannot be paid in cash. You have to be paid digitally, so for the authorities to be able to understand where the money goes to. And this is again to avoid that e-waste is not properly treated. So these are a few very specific, concrete examples of factors that improve the efficiency of the market.
I think this very much covered our next question as well, which was referred to Thomas, that if are there being any measures being done to undertake the issue of leakage of the waste and also the illegal trade of e-waste to the developing countries? Thomas, do you want to comment on that?
I mean, there is a lot of efforts which have been initiated and a lot of work is done, but it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think
yeah. So we have next question from Tian, I guess I pronounced the name right. So she's asking, according to the accounting calculations of the producer payment to EPR organizations, is the accounting being done based on the revenue or the profit the producer earns? So I think she's basically asking how the liability is put on the producer, how you say that this producer should be paying more or this should be paying less.
I think that's a question for Pascal.
Yeah, so I mean the liability producers are individually responsible for the products they put onto the market. And that's one principle. And then what happens is that as a producer places the products on the market, he pays per product a certain amount of money to the PRO to manage that product when it enters its end of life. So I don't quite understand the question actually, but that's how the system currently works.
Okay, I think we are running out of time, so you guys can comment your sections. We will try to reach out to the panelists and have the questions for you, and we will email or somehow connect you guys. Thank you everybody for joining in, and thank you Thomas and Pascal and Joachim for your time. Or Joachim has already left though, but thank you everybody and the time and joining in. Have a good day.
And have a good day. And stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe everybody. Yeah. And the isolation for us.